I've taken the same route home every night for years. My job in the city kept me late most days, so by the time I hit the road, it was usually quiet, peaceful even. I lived about 30 minutes outside the city in a small, wooded suburb called Birch Hollow. The road I used was a long, two-lane highway that cut through a patch of dense forest. During the day it was packed with commuters, but by 10 p.m. it was empty, just me and the trees. I usually didn't mind it. In fact, I looked forward to that stretch of solitude. It gave me time to unwind with my music and think. That night was no different. I had just passed the last gas station outside the city and was entering the forested part of Route 9. It was just past 10:10 p.m., and I was cruising, happy to be almost home. As I rounded one of the final curves before Birch Hollow, I saw headlights coming toward me up ahead. At first, I didn't think anything of it, just another late-night driver like me. But as the car got closer, I realized something was off. The lights were too bright, blinding. I couldn't keep my eyes on the road, so I focused on the white line along the shoulder to stay in my lane. Just when I thought the car would pass me, I saw the impossible. It was in my lane. I barely had time to process it before I jerked the wheel to the right and flew off the road. My car slammed into the ditch that bordered the forest. The impact was brutal. My head bounced off the steering wheel, and everything went momentarily black. When I came to, I was stunned but miraculously okay. No broken bones, no blood. Just shaken. My front bumper was completely destroyed, and steam hissed from under the hood. There was no way this car was driving again. I climbed out of the ditch, stumbling up the slope toward the road. My first thought was that the driver had to be drunk, or worse. I expected to see their tail lights fading into the distance. But instead, their car was stopped on the shoulder, maybe 40 feet up the road. That should have been reassuring, but something about it felt wrong. I hesitated before approaching. We were deep in the woods with no streetlights and no other cars. I decided to play it safe and jogged back down to grab my phone. I dialed emergency services and explained the situation. The dispatcher said a patrol car was close and should be there in under 5 minutes. I thanked her and ended the call, still breathing heavily. As I started to climb the ditch again, a figure appeared at the top of the hill. A man, mid-40s, broad-shouldered, just standing there in silence. "Hey, are you the one who nearly ran me off the road?" I shouted, my voice shaking more than I expected. He didn't respond, didn't even flinch, just stood there, his face partially hidden in the shadows cast by his car's headlights. Then the lights from his car started moving. I realized someone else was in the vehicle, someone backing it up to the edge of the ditch, just a few feet from where I was standing. The driver door swung open, and another man stepped out. He was taller and heavier, with a shaven head and a long coat. The two men began speaking in a language I didn't recognize, maybe Eastern European. It was fast, sharp, and angry sounding. Then the larger man rushed to the back of the car and yanked open the trunk. My heart dropped. He didn't grab anything, he just turned to face me. Both of them suddenly started sprinting down the hill toward me. I didn't wait. I turned and bolted into the woods, ignoring the branches tearing at my arms and the roots under my feet. My only goal was to get away. The men were close behind, crashing through the brush. But they were slower, bulkier. I kept running, dodging trees, jumping over fallen logs. After about a minute, their footsteps grew fainter. I stopped behind a tree, holding my breath, straining to hear anything. Nothing. I didn't know where I was anymore. The woods were pitch black, and my phone had no signal. I didn't even know which direction the road was in. I wandered through the dark, trying to move quietly. I didn't want to make a sound in case they were still nearby. Then I heard it, sirens. Distant but getting closer. I turned toward the sound and started moving, faster now, brushing through branches and pushing aside tall grass. Finally, I reached the road. A pair of patrol cars were parked near the crash site, red and blue lights flashing. 2 officers were shining flashlights at my totaled car. I waved my arms and shouted until they saw me. They ran over, helped me up the slope, and asked what happened. I explained everything, the wrong-way car, the 2 men, the chase through the woods. They took notes, asked for descriptions, and called for backup to check the area. But by the time they searched the woods, the men were gone. No car. No tracks. Nothing. They found no damage beyond the wreck. Nothing stolen. No fingerprints. It was like those men had vanished. I filed a report, and the officers assured me they'd investigate. But with only vague descriptions and no license plate, I could tell they didn't expect much to come of it. Over the next few days, I kept replaying the scene in my head. What were they doing out there? Why did they try to throw me in their trunk? It didn't feel like a robbery. They didn't try to take anything from my car. It felt planned, like I was their target all along. Maybe the crash was a mistake, and they tried to cover it up. Or maybe it was always part of the plan, to lure someone into the woods, far from help. Whatever the truth is, I still drive that road. But never after dark. And I'll never forget the feeling of those headlights, too bright and too close, and the silence that followed me into the trees. Some nights, when I'm on Route 9 and the forest is still, I glance in the rearview mirror, just to be sure there's no one following me. Because I know now, evil doesn't always hide in the dark. Sometimes, it drives right toward you with its high beams on. I'll admit it, I'm a terrible long-distance driver. I get anxious, distracted, and honestly just bored out of my mind. Until recently, I had never driven more than 45 minutes without stopping. So when my job required me to make a 10-hour drive from my quiet hometown of Lakeboro to the company headquarters in Delcrest, I was far from excited. I'd only been with the firm, Meridian Analytics, for about 5 months, all remote. This was my first time meeting the in-person team. They gave me just enough notice to be nervous, but not enough to catch a flight. I packed an overnight bag, programmed my route, and left around 6 p.m., hoping to arrive at the hotel by 3 p.m. the next day. I had imagined a scenic route along the coast, or maybe through some picturesque mountain roads. Nope. My GPS directed me down the eastern backroads, long stretches of forgotten highway cutting through empty desert towns and miles of scrubland. I had never taken this path before, and honestly, it felt like I was driving through another planet. Within an hour, Lakeboro faded into memory. No buildings, no cars, just sand, brush, and the occasional broken fence post. About 3 hours in, I passed a dimly lit gas station. Something about it felt eerie, so I kept driving. Then I remembered something crucial. I hadn't checked my gas tank in a while. I glanced down at the dashboard and immediately panicked. The fuel needle was hovering just above empty. How had I not noticed? The flat, endless road had lulled me into a daze. I figured there'd be another gas station soon. I kept my eyes peeled, watching every mile marker, every worn sign, but there was nothing. No towns, no exits, just me and that creeping sense of dread. My car began to shudder. Not violently, but enough for me to feel it in my hands. That awful jitter right before a stall. I realized I was running out of time. If I didn't find help fast, I'd be stuck in the middle of nowhere after dark. That's when I saw them, headlights off to the side of the road. Parked still like someone was waiting. It looked like a patrol car. Spotlight mirror, light bar on the roof, the works. I had no other choice. I pulled over about 20 feet behind them, shut off my engine to save what little fuel I had, and stepped out. Maybe they had a gas can. Maybe they could radio someone. As I approached, I began to feel uneasy. The car had all the markings of a retired cruiser, no license number, no decals. Just that standard black and white pattern, an old-style frame. I tapped lightly on the driver's side window. No answer. I circled to the passenger side. Still nothing. The interior wasn't trashed, though. It looked lived in. Clean, with a grocery bag full of snacks and water bottles in the passenger seat. Something about that detail unsettled me. It didn't feel like someone had left the car. It felt like they had just stepped out and could return at any second. I turned around and scanned the desert. The sky was pitch black, and the only sounds were the wind and distant rustling. Then I saw it, movement. A figure. Out in the distance, walking slowly between cactus patches. I couldn't tell what they were doing. They didn't have a flashlight. They weren't signaling for help. They were just out there. Moving. Purposeful. Like they were searching for something. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't like this. I turned back toward my car. My plan now was to call roadside assistance or 911 and stay locked inside until help arrived. But then the figure froze. Dead still. I couldn't be sure from that far, but I felt them staring at me. I was paralyzed for a second, unsure whether to run or wave. And then, like a switch had flipped, the person charged toward the road. I bolted. My shoes kicked up gravel as I sprinted back to my car. I didn't even look behind me. My only focus was on the driver's seat and the door lock. I flung myself inside and slammed the door shut. My hands fumbled with the ignition, terrified that if the car didn't start, I was done for. But the man didn't come to my window. He stopped, just at the edge of the road, beside his car. I could see him clearly now in my headlights. He was covered in dirt and sand, head to toe. His black jacket was torn, his jeans stained. He had short dark hair and a thick beard, but his eyes were the most unsettling, wide, unblinking, like he was studying me. He stood completely still, like a deer caught in the beams. No expression, no words, just watching. I didn't dare start the engine. If it stuttered, he'd know I was low on gas. So I stayed frozen, dialing 911 over and over until I finally got through. I whispered my situation to the dispatcher. She said someone would be there soon. As I spoke, I watched the man slowly return to his car. He got in, turned it on, without headlights, and silently rolled down the road. It was another 30 minutes before a real patrol car arrived. The officer was young, casual. He poured a couple gallons of gas from a jug into my tank while I recounted everything. He barely reacted, just nodded, chuckled once, and said something like, "Probably digging for gold or burying treasure." He didn't even check the area. I was too shaken to argue. I just thanked him, drove off, and tried to forget about it. But the image of that man, how calm he was, how ready, it still eats at me. What was he doing out there in the desert? Why did he have an old patrol car? Was he pretending to be law enforcement? Or was that just a convenient cover? And most importantly, what would have happened if I hadn't seen him coming? I never found out who he was. No reports came out. No follow-up calls. Nothing. Just a quiet warning buried in the dust of a forgotten road. Now, every time I plan a long trip, I double-check everything: gas, tires, lights. And I never stop for anyone. Ever. Because that night, I realized something. Help isn't always help. And the person watching from the shadows might not want to be found. Somewhere out there, on a cracked stretch of highway, a fake patrol car still waits in the dark, just hoping the next stranded driver walks a little too close. My name is Marcus, and I'm 23 years old. I work at a 24-hour bar and grill called Red Lanterns in the town of Creighton. We're famous around here for our deep dish pizza and late-night cocktails. It's not a fancy place, but regulars love it. For some reason, the owners decided we should offer pizza delivery. I always thought it was more of a hassle than it was worth, especially since we didn't get that many late-night orders. But because of how slow it usually was, I was the only delivery driver scheduled from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. That night, the bar was unusually packed. Groups of college students and night owls crowded every booth and stool. Since deliveries were slow, I was helping out waiting tables in the meantime, weaving between loud conversations and greasy dishes. Around 3 a.m., the manager handed me a delivery ticket, just one pizza, a thin crust meat lover's special. I was kind of relieved to get out of the chaos for a while. The address was about 15 minutes away on the outskirts of town. I grabbed the insulated delivery bag, tossed it in my old Honda, and punched the address into my GPS. I didn't recognize the road name, but I figured it was one of those long, countryside roads just past the town limits. No big deal. The streets were calm and quiet as I drove, a welcome break from the noise of the bar. I had the window cracked and some soft music playing. Everything felt perfectly normal until the GPS suddenly chimed, "You've arrived at your destination." I blinked in confusion. I hadn't passed any homes or even streetlights. I was pulled over on the shoulder of a two-lane road that bordered the Pinehurst Nature Reserve. No houses, no driveways, just trees. I double-checked the address on the order and compared it with my screen. They matched. It wasn't a mistake on my end. The delivery was apparently meant for the entrance of the forest preserve. My stomach twisted a bit. Thinking there must have been a mistake, I called the number listed on the order. It rang once, just once, before the guy picked up. "Hey, this is Marcus from Red Lanterns. I'm out here with your order, but I think there might be an error with the address." There was a pause, a long one. I could hear someone breathing on the other end of the line. Then the man spoke, low, calm. "I see you. Look to your left." I froze. I slowly turned to my left, and at first I saw nothing but darkness and towering trees. Then something moved. A figure. A man stepping forward and waving from just inside the tree line. My heart started racing. He was standing about 20 feet into the woods, barely lit by the headlights of my car. Why was he in the forest? Why not just come to the road? Something didn't feel right at all. Against my better judgment, I stepped out of the car with the pizza. The night air was still and cold, the kind that feels too quiet, like the world is holding its breath. I crossed the road and stopped just short of the grass. The guy didn't move. He just stood there, half in shadow, watching me. I waved and called out, "Hey, got your order. You can just come grab it from here." He didn't respond. Instead, he looked around, behind me, to the sides, like he was scanning for someone. That's when the alarm bells really started ringing in my head. I suddenly realized how isolated this spot was. No homes, no cameras, no lights. If something happened, no one would hear me scream. I took a small step back and asked him again to come closer. He hesitated, then began walking quickly toward me. I didn't like how fast he was moving. I backed up, pizza still in hand, but he lunged forward and grabbed my arm. Hard. I panicked and tried to pull away, but he was strong. He didn't say anything, he just started dragging me toward the woods. He wasn't yelling, wasn't making a scene. He was focused, silent, determined. My sneakers slid in the grass as I resisted, twisting and turning. I realized then that he wasn't alone. This was a trap. I threw a punch, then another. 2 clean hits to his face. He stumbled back, releasing my arm. That gave me just enough time to bolt toward my car. I didn't stop to look until I reached the driver's side door. I turned my head and saw him staggering back into the woods. But worse, 2 other men stepped out from behind the trees. They had been waiting, watching. One of them pointed at me before they both ran back into the shadows. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and floored it. I didn't even bother checking the GPS. I just drove. I didn't stop until I reached the police station, which was a few blocks past downtown Creighton. Still shaken, I stumbled into the front desk and told the officer everything. I gave them the phone number from the order and the address. They asked a few questions, but said it was unlikely they'd catch anyone that far out at this hour. The officer who took my statement chuckled when I described the situation. "Probably some prank or drunk campers," he said casually. Then he added, half jokingly, "Unless you almost interrupted something they didn't want found." I didn't laugh. My hands were still trembling. I knew what I felt out there. It wasn't a prank. They weren't waiting for a laugh. They were waiting for someone to walk into the dark and never come out. Back at the restaurant, my manager didn't seem that surprised when I told him what happened. He pulled up the order in our system, but said the name was Greg M. Most likely fake, and the number was already disconnected. "Well, you're lucky, man," he said, handing me a leftover slice of pepperoni pizza. "Take the rest of the night off." I accepted, but food was the last thing on my mind. That drive home was the quietest of my life. Every headlight behind me made me flinch. Every shadow between the trees made me hold my breath. I couldn't stop replaying the moment he grabbed me, how close I had come to disappearing. It's been months since that delivery, and I still refuse to take orders outside the town limits. I'll bus tables, scrub floors, do dishes, whatever it takes to stay close to people and well-lit places. Sometimes I wonder what those men were doing out there. Were they hunting? Stalking? Had they done this before and gotten away with it? I'll never know. But I do know one thing. I was one step from vanishing without a trace. And if you ever find yourself delivering food in the middle of the night to somewhere that doesn't feel right, turn around.